My name is Tony Streit. I'm the Principal Investigator for the National Center on After-School and Summer Enrichment, or NCASE, and the facilitator of today's session. We are very happy to have you join us for this discussion of how to further support and professionalize practitioners working in out-of-school time. I am talking to you this afternoon from the annual convention of the National Afterschool Association here in Dallas, Texas, where several thousand out-of-school practitioners and program leaders have gathered. This is a bit of an experiment for us, the first time that we're doing a webinar like this live from a conference, and we hope it will offer an interesting opportunity to hear from a range of voices on the topic. Here in the room, we have some 75 leaders from across the field who are participating in person, and online we have several hundred more participants of this webinar from all over the country. I want to remind everyone that this session is being recorded and will be available as an archived Connect session on the NCASE website after the event. Before we get started, I want to introduce Dr. Ellen Wheatley, the Acting Director of the Office of Child Care at the Administration for Children and Families. OCC is committed to increasing access to quality child care that promotes early learning and development of children from birth through school age in partnership with their families and communities. Dr. Wheatley leads the Office of Child Care's work to implement the Child Care and Development Block Grant Act of 2014. Dr. Wheatley would like to share a few thoughts to help us kick off this afternoon's discussion, and we're so fortunate to have her joining us from Washington, D.C. at this time. Dr. Wheatley?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and please let me welcome all of you to this great event on behalf of the Administration for Children and Families at the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm excited about being here this afternoon and talking with you because I have a great love of the commitment that we have to after school and summer learning. We believe at ACF that there is great importance to the efforts to further professionalize the field. And I have a very brief story to tell about my own experience regarding the need to do this. And we're going back 23 years. 24 years ago, there was a big blockbuster movie. It was rated PG-13, and it starred a bunch of very large dinosaurs. When my daughter was 6 and in first grade and needed after-school care, I discovered that it was provided right at the school by a local child care center who contracted with people to come in and arrange, organize, and run the program. It was a 3:30 to 6 o'clock program, and they could not get any one person to do that for a week. They ended up with 4 different people doing that. So Monday and Tuesday was one person, and there was a different person every other day. My daughter needed medication in the afternoon. We couldn't get anyone to give that to her on a regular basis. And then came October, when I walked in on a perfectly beautiful, sunny, crisp fall day to find that the television was on. Everybody was gathered around except my daughter, who was crying on somebody's lap. I asked what was wrong, and I got this sneer of, well, she didn't like the movie. They were showing my 6-year-old Jurassic Park, and no doubt she didn't like that movie, and no doubt that none of what I've just said is in the least bit what good out-of-school time care is. Fortunately, both she and my son received a lot of great out-of-school time care during the summer, and summer enrichment is outstanding for children. They learned great skills, made good friends, and learned a lot of things that they were able to take back to school with them in the fall. So they were able to experience the best and worst of out-of-school time at that time. And the field has come such a long way since then. I'm sure those things are not happening anymore. And so it's great that we have a training and technical assistance provider, the National Center for After-School and Summer Enrichment, NCASE. And there is a summer learning brief and national data snapshot to inform the field of the importance of after-school and summer learning, to highlight the support for children living in families with low income as well. And NCASE continues to provide this training and TA to states and territories on school-age topics. They recently concluded a peer learning community bringing together stakeholder teams from 23 states to focus their discussion and action planning on topics related to quality improvement. Now, the National Afterschool Association is a wonderful partner to NCASE and to the Administration for Children and Families. They recently published a State of the After-School Professional report. As a contributing organization for NCASE, they're a valued partner in efforts to elevate this workforce discussion to the national level. And every day for children who are school age, who receive before and after school or summer enrichment, is an important day, a day when they need high quality, well-qualified staff, when they need opportunities to learn and to grow and to enjoy each other. And I hope that no 6-year-old ever has to watch Jurassic Park in an after-school program ever again. So again, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this wonderful event. And I will be with you for another 20-25 minutes. If there's an opportunity for you to ask questions, I'm very happy to answer anything I can. Thank you, and have a great session.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you so much, Ellen, and thank you to everyone at ACF. So for today's session, we have 3 broad goals. We want to provide an overview of out-of-school time workforce, including data and efforts to professionalize the field. We want to address key questions and issues regarding OST workforce development, and we want to highlight promising practices and state examples of system-building efforts. Here with us today on the panel are a number of experts in the area of out-of-school time and professional development, helping us address these goals and sharing their perspectives on the past, present, and future of out-of-school time. First, we have Gina Warner, CEO of National Afterschool Association, and her colleague Heidi Ham, NAA's Vice President for Program Strategies. And together they'll talk about the state of the field and findings from the recent research efforts to better describe the status of the OST workforce. Next, my colleague from NCASE, Ellen Gannett, will share a bit of the history of efforts to professionalize the field over a number of years. We also have 2 voices from the state perspective to share lessons learned on state-level workforce development efforts. Susan Gimilaro from across NH in New Hampshire, and Monty Holz from the Indiana Afterschool Network. And we're very happy to have everyone on this panel. Just a few instructions before we get underway. The panel will be taking questions midway through today's webinar and at the end. For those of you online, we encourage you to enter your questions in the chat box at any time, and we'll be taking them when we have the opportunity. There may be questions about resources. At the end of today's session, we'll be sharing where you can find the resources that are being talked about and others that are part of our national library. And just very quickly, a little background on NCASE, as Ellen shared. We were established by ACF in 2015 to ensure that school-age children in families of low income have increased access to after-school and summer learning experiences that contribute to children's overall development and academic achievement. We're one of 10 national centers that are part of ACF's Early Childhood Technical Assistance System. And if you visit the OCC fact sheet on their website, you'll note that their mission statement specifically addresses their intent to improve the quality of care to support children's healthy development and learning by supporting child care licensing, quality improvement, and support for child care workers to attain more training and education. Today's discussion is clearly in direct response to that mission. So let's get started, and Gina and Heidi, if you can kick us off with your latest work.
Yeah, so thank you, Tony, and thank you all for being here in person, and those of you who are watching us online. We're going to be talking today about our profession and also systems to support our profession. So I thought I would begin with, in my opinion, what is a wonderful example of a best practice of a professional development system. And so this particular example I'm going to be sharing with you, it's an intensive 20-week university course. It's offered at this particular site for all the full-time and part-time employees at this site. It is a combination of online and hands-on classes, and it culminates in a new certification that's being created for these full-time and part-time employees. So I'm sure you're asking yourself, where can I go visit this wonderful best practice? You can go to your nearest Wegmans grocery store, because I have just described for you the Wegmans Cheese University that every person who is a full-time and a part-time employee of Wegmans grocery store, the training that they receive to be able to sell you the most flavorful cheeses for your holiday entertaining. So if I leave you with one thing today, it's like, do we deserve to know more about how to interact with our children with our cheese? So I thought I was just stunned when I saw that, so I had to be able to share that with you. So our profession, at the National Afterschool Association, we are the voice of the after-school profession, and we just completed a survey in the field. We had responses from nearly 5,000 people working in after-school programs to tell us something about themselves as professionals. Now, I will say that when we describe the after-school workforce, and those who are here in the room with me today reinforce this, that in our real lives, we often realize that the people working after school, it primarily we describe it as a part-time, underpaid, underage, and temporary profession. And that holds true for a lot of us in many of our programs. But I am happy to report that the 5,000 people who responded to our survey actually identified themselves as having higher levels of education, having more longevity in the field, and being better compensated than we might expect. So now, would we believe that two things can be true? Yes, they can. But the fact that we had, again, 5,000 responses, and that 78% of those people identified themselves as working full-time, that 41% of them have a 4-year degree, that 34% have a master's degree, and 11% have completed some postgraduate work, that 61% of them make more than $30,000 a year, tell us that we actually are in much better shape as a field than we often sometimes give ourselves credit for, and certainly more often than I think external people, what they believe about our field. The survey also showed that we are further along in our work towards a path of professionalism than we probably many times think. I'm not sure exactly where Wegmans grocery stores are, but I know we are moving in that direction. And we have a fantastic starting point as an association, as in a field, and that's with our core knowledge and competencies for after-school and youth development professionals. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, our NAA Vice President, Heidi Ham, to talk with you all about what we know and how we are using our core knowledge and competencies.
Thanks, Gina. So we know that research shows that quality after-school and summer learning programs have positive impacts on youth, and well-prepared staff, I think as Deb Vandell put it yesterday in one of the sessions that I was in, are the linchpin to that quality. So our recent survey data shows that people in our field possess a variety of education levels. They come from different backgrounds and experience. And so that variability in the workforce has indicated a key strategy for improving quality is the need to identify the skills and dispositions that people need to be successful in working with children and youth. So in response to that, and this was several years ago in 2011, NAA published the Core Knowledge and Competencies for After-School and Youth Development Professionals, and those outline the knowledge, the skills, the dispositions necessary for after-school professionals to provide those quality programs that we know impact kids' success. So we have the core knowledge and competencies, but we realize that in order to get the desired impact, we need to have, we need to take it a step further and have systems in place for professional development to build those skills in our workforce. A recent set of interviews that we did, similar to our survey data, was actually, I think we were really pleased with the data to see, because it wasn't where, we weren't where we thought we were, and we were in fact a little bit more ahead, which is always, it's always nice to see, right? And a recent set of interviews we conducted, it revealed promising practices. So we found national systems, higher ed systems, state, county, and city professional development systems that have all integrated these core knowledge and competencies to build the workforce in their communities and their states, and for those who need it. And so later in the session, you'll hear more about these promising practices from Ellen and also from 2 of our state systems leaders.
Thanks, Heidi and Gina. So it's been a challenging journey as we face the goal of professionalizing the field. And I took some time to catalog and try to better understand why it's taking so long. So there are a couple of factors that get in the way of making steady progress if we're thinking about out-of-school time professionals. One of them has to do with the fragmentation of the field. And as you can see from the diagram, we have multiple but interconnecting systems of out-of-school time. We have programs that have an orientation and a theoretical framework and a funding stream that is more aligned with school-age care, and certainly funded through the Child Care and Development Block Grant and supported by the Office of Child Care. It builds on the early childhood system and the work of child development and family engagement and so on. So it was really an outgrowth of the early childhood world, 0 to 13. In the second sector, or the field, of course, is the after-school sector. And in that kind of domain, we think about educational goals, 21st century community learning center programs, Title I programs, and so on. And those that are being supported by the ESSA grants and so on through the departments of education. They have a particular orientation toward helping young people with some of their academic goals. And again, a separate funding stream, separate regulations, different orientation toward how they view the work. And then you have youth work. Youth work define standards of program quality. We need academic pathways and career pathways that will allow people to advance as they might want to, but that those pathways then are commensurate with compensation and opportunities for promotion, and that there are ways for us to track our experiences in a way through registries and other models of making sure that when we attend the NAA convention, that we're actually being able to track that experience and make it matter and add up. In addition, we want to make sure that there are options at every level. And we know that there are people in our field that are thinking about the work as they pass through into other fields, But then there are folks who really want to stay in the work and are looking for opportunities for growth and promotion. So those are some of the factors that get in the way of the growth of the field. But I think we're making some headway in making that alignment happen and trying to set a goal for ourselves for some kind of unification of the field, which is something that I think would really advance the workforce goals. Now, we have had fits and starts along the way that date back, really till the early 1900s, and maybe even earlier than that. We have had opportunities for settlement houses and for boys clubs and different efforts that have some historical roots in our work. So to think that our work just started, in the 1980s or 90s is really not true. We can go way back to some very early work that happened with these efforts. But our big interest in professionalization, which is quite different than just supports for the workforce, I think emerged in the 1970s and 80s. And we looked to a number of different places to set a star of where we wanted to move. We looked actually at the United Kingdom. There were many study tours that took us there and to see how could it work and could any of the lessons of UK or Scandinavia, for that example, be able to be applied to the US experience. And we found that in many ways, because of the diversification and the state leadership of each one of the models, that one system is not going to happen. And I don't know if we even want to think about that, but unification might be something that would be where an alignment might be something that's achievable as opposed to one statewide or national system as you have in the UK. In the 1970s and 80s, you also saw that there was great important work on trying to define what youth work is. And we looked toward the early childhood system as a way to think about how we could build out the after-school sector as well, the out-of-school time sector. So we built on and looked toward the military as a model, as a way to think about a systematic approach for improving practice and getting people to think about sort of a way where we could encourage program quality and best practices. We thought for a while there, could we borrow from the Child Development Associate, the CDA of early childhood, and have a Youth Development Associate? People came together in meetings with the Council of Professional Recognition and said, oh, we needed a credential of our own built on the CDA. What was the response? Often it was, where's the market? Where is the hue and cry of what could be possible? Why isn't the field itself asking for this in a way that makes a difference and while we would make that kind of an investment? And so we had conversations and more people came to the table, and it didn't happen. So here we go. We worked with the Wheelock College Center for Professional Development. They gave us some excellent information about how to professionalize the field and the workforce. And again, because of the diversity of the field, unlike some of the early childhood efforts, we weren't able to make it stick in those early 1990 years. But then we got a big acceleration of effort in the 2000s. And this is where many funders came on board. The Wallace Foundation, the Lucille and David Packard Foundation, other people that were making big investments in the professionalization of the field. And we, in my hometown of Boston, we received some money from the Barr Foundation to work on citywide efforts. So we kept kind of shrinking the effort from national, but we weren't going to make too much progress on the national level, to the state, and then bang, it was at the city level where we were really making some major progress. And so there you were beginning to see efforts such as Achieve Boston, school age and youth development credentials that brought the school age people and the youth development people together. We did a project with AED on building a skilled and stable workforce. And when I say we, these were very large collaborations, and many people that are in this room today were part of that table. I'm excited to, we're all working on it and still working on it. Then came along the Next Generation Youth Work Coalition. And that was, again, a very important effort of thinking about the field in a slightly different way. Rather than thinking about the work as a time in which you work, 3 to 6 p.m. or only on summer, the Next Generation Youth Work Coalition, which was made up of 20 or more organizations thinking about this issue, thought about the work across settings and across ages. Well, that was a big change of heart. And I think that it really changed the way we thought about the field, that it was across the continuum as opposed to only a single point in time. And it opened up doors and opened up opportunities for us that really I don't think we would have been able to do if we hadn't had that kind of effort. So where are we now? One of the things that I'd like to say is that we're beginning to see, and we're on the threshold of, I think, having enough of the systematic parts to begin to really figure out this new and growing system. We've got the core competencies. We have national standards of program quality. Many states have registries. Many states have their own systems. I think, to me, it feels as if we have an opportunity to have more and more dialogue about bringing these pieces together, and so that they're not disparate parts, but that they come together around a combined vision. So now we have an opportunity to hear about how it's playing out in 2 states, and Susan will. Oh, yes. Oh, you wanted to have some questions.
Yeah, before we go there, we have a few minutes here for questions. So thank you, Ellen.
Sure.
Thank you, Gina and Heidi. I know there's been some questions online, and there may be some in the room. Kate Goddard, my colleague, Kate, could you share the questions from the chat room first so we can address those?
Yes. So we do have one question from the chat room, from the virtual attendees. And the question is to the NAA, those who are sharing about the evaluation, the survey results of the educational level and compensation. And the question was, were the respondents working in 21st century programs, licensed childcare, unlicensed programs? So we wanted a little bit more information about the programs that the data was speaking of.
So it was all of those settings. It was parent fee-based programs. We did it is broken down, not in the information you all have here, but it was across a diversity of settings the respondents were.
And did you have some sense of positions that folks were in?
So I think let me get my little cheat sheet here. So 28% of the people identified themselves as being either an executive director for a multi-site, 32% identified themselves as being program directors, and then 10% identified themselves as being frontline staff.
Great.
Yeah. And I will say, to the point I think that Ellen raised about, I think this is really a struggle and an opportunity for us as a field, is that we do represent this diversity, and this survey is very reflective of that. Across settings, across agencies. And I like to talk about, I really think when I think about my experience in the field, which is nowhere as extensive, as Ellen's, but I think back to, and I'm sure many of us working in after school can recall in the not so distant future, not so distant past, that we were talking a lot about expanded learning time and what that meant for the field. And I really think where we are now, we are moving away from what I like to say is the when and the where. We were so focused on, is it 3 to 6? Is it 2 to 8? Is it Saturday? Is it summer? And I really think we're moving ourselves towards the who and the what. And so the what being the high quality experiences and what the professionals are delivering, and the who being those highly trained individuals that are doing. And I'm excited because I think that's the point we needed to get to the work we want for the young people we're serving.
Thanks. We still have a few more minutes for questions or comments in the room. Kathy Schleier, our colleague, has a microphone. Does anyone have anything for the first half of our panel? Please don't be shy. If you could introduce yourself when you make your comment, that would be great.
This is Dale Blythe from the University of Minnesota, retired. I'm wondering, as you mentioned breaking down the survey results, did you see, what kind of differences did you see? Did anything stand out when you were looking more at the front line or more of the experienced people, that type of thing?
I think it's what you'd expect, that the salary ranges were commensurate with higher levels of responsibility, and similarly with education. I will say, though, and this is something that not only reflected in this survey, but reflected in some other specific credential work we have done, is that higher level of education. Now, our challenge is, and Dale, I'll pick on you a little because you're from the higher education field, we know that those education degrees are different, right? That's our challenge. A lot of people come to this work with recreation degrees, some with education degrees, sociology degrees. So while we are seeing increasing levels of the 4-year degree in education, we still have a wide variety of what that 4-year education experience looks like, and then what it means for their preparation for the work.
Yeah, I would say that the survey results that you got are very similar to ones we got in Minnesota, showing it was a better educated workforce than we thought. So there was a lot of similarities, but there was also relatively little relationship between a degree and, I don't remember how the analysis was done, but having a degree and the competency in the youth work field,
right,
because of the wide ranges of degrees, what your point you were making.
And so we do a lot of work looking at what other professions, and I would say other industries, are doing, and that is what we see as well. That and I think this is where we see a lot of our value of higher education discussion, the role of education versus the role of competencies. And I think that's where our competencies come into play. I mean, it's great to have that education and training experience, but then to identify what are the specifics. And those of you here in this room and those who are on the line watching us as employers, that's what we want to know. We don't necessarily want to, not only see what classes you've taken as an undergraduate, but we actually want to know that you're able to do the work that we need you to do on the day you show up, for the most part.
Just in response to your question about the relationship between the degree and the longevity and quality of the experience, there is a study, though, that called the MARS study, the Massachusetts Afterschool Research Study, that did show a relationship between having credentialed or certified teachers in the after-school programs and those programs that were able to reach child and youth, high levels of child and youth outcomes and engagement, engagement between children and youth, and between the staff and the children, and then the staff and the families. So there is some evidence that it matters, but it's not a big study. It's an older study, and we'll have to see and look again.
I'd also like to say that anecdotally, that the folks that come in with degrees other than in the youth development field are interested in building their skills, right? Or they wouldn't be there working in the field. So last year I was at the Utah After School Network conference presenting on the core knowledge and competencies, And the folks in the room, like one of the people, it was her very first day. She had a degree, but it was her very first day at work. And she was just amazed at the core knowledge and competencies, because even though she had a degree in a different field, she could look at it and try to figure out, use those self-assessment tools. Like, where am I? What is it that's gonna help make me successful in this field? I have a pathway, something to follow, assess myself, find training, professional development that will help me build these skills, because I'm here, I want to make a difference, and the way to do that is by having those skills in those programs.
Thanks, Heidi. We have about a minute more, and I think there was one more question online.
There's a lot of discussion happening online, so thank you all. So one question we received was, what do the current core competencies have to say about family engagement?
So I think that we have a handout in person. It's a one-pager. I think you also should have access to that if you're joining us via the web. So there is one content area you can see that focuses on family engagement. There are 5 different levels of our core knowledge and competencies. So within that, and I'm not going to go into the specifics, I'm going to invite people to engage with that document that they have, and then go a little bit deeper with the tools that we have online. But you can see kind of where it starts, where you need to be when you first start, and then what's the progression of that skill as you move along in your career or move along in your development. So it starts with, I can interact with parents, I understand the communities that I work with, and then it goes really on the other end would be, I can teach people how to do this. I can interact with others in the community and talk about the importance of that. So you can really see that continuum of development within the core knowledge and competencies in each content area.
Great, thanks, Heidi. And again, I think if you're in the webinar right now, you'll see links to a number of handouts, and one is a summary of the core competencies, but the full report is in the NCASE library, and we'll be showing a link to that at the end of the session. So I want to now turn to kind of the second half of what we're doing, and oftentimes it's so important to think about this from a state level and from the work that different states are doing, the models and lessons learned. And so we've asked 2 state leaders to join us and share a little bit about their work. And Susan Gimilaro with Across NH is starting us off, sharing the New Hampshire experience.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm Susan Gimilaro. I'm the Across New Hampshire Project Director. And Across New Hampshire is the after-school provider services contractor for New Hampshire. We are funded through a grant through the CCDF funds from the Child Development Bureau and the Department of Health and Human Services in New Hampshire. We are just completing our 6th year of providing services to after school in New Hampshire. Our organization collaborates with a wide number of organizations, including the Child Development Bureau, the New Hampshire Afterschool Network, the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension, 21st Century Community Learning Centers, and a host of after-school programs and YMCAs and Boys and Girls Clubs. New Hampshire is a small state. We have roughly 600 licensed and license-exempt after-school programs. We just completed a large mapping project to identify where those programs are. But despite our size, we're developing a robust professional development system. And right now we have 4 components in our system. The first is that we have a New Hampshire and our after-school credential. We also have professional development training opportunities that start from the foundational level and work up through leadership. We have a technical assistance program and a New Hampshire professional registry as well. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about each of those components. The first component is the after-school credential. It was first launched in 2010 and then was first revised in 2013. New Hampshire After-School Network really took the lead on the revision and worked with, again, the collaborators that I had mentioned. The revision process really brought us to a place of looking at credentials in other states. We wanted to know what other states had in place for their credential. We wanted to understand what their core knowledge areas were and their competencies. And of course, we looked at the NAA core competencies and core knowledge areas as well. But we really wanted the competencies and the CKAs to be our own. We wanted them to reflect New Hampshire. So we went through this process over and over. And in the end, we selected the NAA core competencies and core knowledge areas. And we did that because we found that they really identified with that body of knowledge that you need to work effectively in out-of-school time programs. And they aligned with our beliefs in New Hampshire. So we adopted those in 2013. Now, our credential program has 3 lattices. We have the direct service lattice, we have an administrator lattice, and we also have a master professional lattice. And the master professional lattice has several endorsements. So you could be a program consultant, you could be an individual mentor, you could be a workshop trainer, you could be a faculty member or an allied professional. And then within each of those lattices, there are different levels so that you can work up from level 1 through level 4, through level 6 perhaps, depending upon which lattice you're on. And the lattice really reflects your education and your experience. So the opportunity for growth there is pretty significant. So since our revision in 2013, we now have 300 after-school credentials in New Hampshire, which is pretty good. We're very proud of that. Later this year, we'll be working on revising our credential again because we try to keep our credentials aligned with the child care licensing regulations, and who's another partner of ours. And so we have some licensing regulations that will be changing within the next few months. So our revisions will work come after that. So that is our first component. Our next component is our professional development and training. And again, these build directly on the NAA CKAs. Every training that Across New Hampshire offers is linked directly to the NAA CKAs. So the training opportunities that we start off at the foundational level. We have after-school orientation, which was developed through the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension and the New Hampshire After-School Network. So that's really our basic training that we have. Beyond that, you can move into the After-School Basic Series, which is a series that covers really everything you need to know to start your work in after school. We then move up to intermediate, and the intermediate trainings really bring the CKAs to life in specific content areas. And the last is advanced, but I'll talk about that in 1 minute. So as of 2016, that's 5 years of Across New Hampshire, roughly 10,000 individuals have participated in the foundational and the intermediate trainings that we have. The trainings that we offer primarily are cost-free as well, thanks to the funding that we receive from the Child Development Bureau. So while we want to ensure that we are providing those foundational and intermediate trainings for after-school professionals so that they will have the knowledge and the skills to provide high-quality programming to the students, we've decided to make an intentional shift in some of our trainings, and that is to add more advanced trainings to our offerings. Our belief is that strong visionary leaders really make a difference. They impact quality, but we also think that they impact the recruitment and the retention of after-school staff. In New Hampshire, like many other states, really has some difficulties in recruiting and retaining staff. So we're hoping that our leadership development will really impact that for the better. So we launched last year our first Leadership Institute, and our work is focused on some of the work of John Maxwell. And we started looking at the 5 levels of leadership. And it was really interesting because we had such a mixed group join us for this Leadership Institute, and they were vetted before they could enroll in it. And we started with level 1 leaders. So level 1 leaders have staff who work with them and follow them because they have to, right? It's your boss, this is your job, you follow your director. But then what we're really looking to do is to grow those leaders to level 5 leaders. And level 5 leaders have staff who want to be there because of who that leader is and what that leader represents. So we launched that last year. We learned a few things, and we're launching our next cohort next week. And we tried to implement some of the changes that we learned from that first Leadership Institute. Next year, we'll take our Leadership Institutes to the next part, and that will be advocacy. Learning how to tell your story. Who are you? What is your program about? And why does it matter? We'll also work on program management because we still need those skills. We're leaders with vision, but we still need to have some background on supervision, fiscal management, developing partnerships, and how to do that. So we'll launch advocacy, program management, and budgeting next year as the second part of our leadership series. So that is our second component. Our third component is technical assistance. And we're really working to refocus our work in technical assistance now. And we have been working with technical assistance for about 3 to 4 years. We have managed to work with 855 sites in New Hampshire over that time. And our technical assistance has perhaps been a follow-up to training. You go to a training, you learn so much from the training, and then you get back to your program and think, ooh, now what? How do I apply this? So we do some follow-up with that. We also offer coaching and mentoring, really some skill development, and some performance-based assessment and work. And we also work to develop some administrative skills. We're very happy with that, but we feel it needs some tweaking. We're not quite sure how we're going to tweak it, but that's our next phase. And then the fourth and last component of our professional development system is the New Hampshire Professional Registry, which is the Registry of Child Care Aware of America. And we are members. The Child Development Bureau is a member, and its contractors are all members of this registry. So we have taken this we're still working with it, but right now, the professional development opportunities that are offered by Across New Hampshire, that are offered by Child Care Aware of New Hampshire, that the Child Development Bureau offers, and a few other organizations offer, are all listed in the registry. So you can go, if you're a member of the registry, you can go in, you look at the calendar, select the workshop that is appropriate for you with the CKAs in there, and enroll for it. And then once you have completed that training, Across goes in and we mark your training as completed. The best part is, though, you can generate your own training transcript right from the registry. So there's no more shuffling around of certificates, wondering where you have put this certificate or where you have put that. It's all right there in the registry. And the registry is portable. So you move from New Hampshire, there are other states that are using it. You can pull up your registry at any point. So that is some of the work that we're doing. As I said, we're on our way to being robust. We still have a lot of tweaking to do, but we've made quite a bit of progress thanks to the collaborations that we have developed in New Hampshire.
Thanks, Susan. I think I want to go to New Hampshire and be professionally developed. I fear that I'm going to give an account that sounds a little more chaotic than this careful, thoughtful discussion that Susan just gave, but I don't think that's actually true. In Indiana, we have been working hard over the course of several years to try to address the issue of quality workforce around out-of-school time. I think what I'm going to present to you is a little bit more of a narrative of how we went about that and highlight some things around that narrative. I do want to thank NCASE and NAA for having us here today to talk about this. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of find out from my peers around the country that what we thought were big challenges are common, which doesn't make them any smaller, but it's good to know that other people are suffering through it too. So the challenges of a fragmented workforce is something that we've been trying to navigate for several years, and perhaps with some success, sometimes some fits and starts, as somebody mentioned, in trying to work through that, some ebbs and flows in the work we've done. We have a very diverse field and we have a very diverse workforce with kind of multiple ways that people get into it and get out of it. And the same kinds of workforce challenges. And so what I heard in the room earlier, what I think I heard online is some challenges about the survey that shows the workforce having 6 to 10 years average tenure. And I'm working in communities where a provider is happy if they have somebody who stays long enough to amortize the $50 they spend on the background check. It's good to hear that this work's getting done. I think there's progress being made. So let me try to talk about the story in Indiana. As I talk, I'm going to use the term we. And so this is the part of the movie where they have a little picture of who all the characters were. So let me run through the cast of characters in the Indiana story. There's the Indiana Afterschool Network. My name is Monty Hulse. I am Director of Regional Engagement with the Indiana Afterschool Network. We are one of the Mott-supported state networks in Indiana. We've been in existence around 10 years. And we, in addition to Mott support, we also benefit from an affiliation with the Lilly Endowment, which is a major endowment in the United States that invests heavily in the state of Indiana. They are one of the players here. I'll talk a little bit more about them. We also, for several years, have worked with the Indiana Department of Education around their 21st Century Community Learning Centers to help them do training, to help them do development. The Lilly Endowment is our partner, a major philanthropy in the United States that does invest heavily. One of their 3 priorities is around community development and particularly around youth development. So they are investing around the state. One of the type of organizations I like to work through is Intermediaries. So the work we've been doing around professional workforce development has involved other intermediary organizations that kind of have a slightly different slice of the youth work field. So there's the Indiana Youth Institute, which is a large organization that really does a lot of training and some explicit professional development and TA with a variety of youth organizations around the state. There's the Indiana Youth Services Association that administers a particular flow of funding from the state of Indiana. Parenthetically, IAN also shares an office space with IYSA. There is The Journey, which is another Lilly Endowment professional development program, which focuses very much on kind of the inner growth of youth work leaders and have had a lot of influence in terms of bringing together peers, cohorts of peers around the state, around broadly youth work, not just out of school time, but youth work. So those are some of the intermediaries when I say we that are working together. Also, the Indiana Department of Education, which in administering the 21st Century Funds has been a major supporter of out-of-school time in the state, as well as the organization that in Indiana administers the CCDF funding and the CCDF program, which is now called the Office of Early Childhood and Out-of-School Learning. And as you might imagine, we abbreviate that, and so we talk about the office. But that renaming of that was about 3 years ago, and that kind of marks their interest in really expanding their mission to include both school age and early childhood work as well. So that's the cast of characters that has been working. IAN's basic contribution of this started, and one of the first things we really did was develop a set of quality standards around out-of-school time in the state. And so we developed a core set of out-of-school time standards, which over time we've expanded into a set of specialty standards around STEM, college success and readiness, summer learning, all sorts of things. And if you go to indianaafterschool.org, you can download all the standards. We developed those standards not alone, but we developed them with the we I just described, with all the youth development organizations, with providers, with public entities, with philanthropy from around the state, with school-based providers, so that there was buy-in from the front end of that, and that's what we built a lot of our work on. Very soon after we were starting to work on the standards, we were also working then on some core competencies, and thankfully, NAA came out with their core competencies, and we largely built our competencies on those core competencies, and then went out to try to get some buy-in from them, particularly from higher education. And again, the process of developing the competencies, we brought in higher education to be developed that, along with a broad set of stakeholders. And so we crosswalked the NAA competencies with first other competencies we found around the country, and then those competencies around the existing curriculums around youth work in a variety of higher education institutions around the state. We did find that often there was a lot of correspondence, not exactly sometimes, but we were able to get the attention of the hires because the Lilly Endowment wanted this to have happen. And they were interested in making the Lilly Endowment happy, and we all are. And so we did work with them so that they got beyond just trying to get money to do what they were already doing, but to try to adjust their program so that we felt that they were more aligned with the competencies that we had and with the standards for the program. And over time, we got that established so that there are now credentials, there are degrees, 2- and 4-year degrees at various institutions throughout the state. They are in different departments. Sometimes they're in public health, sometimes they're in a kind of youth work or a human service category. And that means we have people coming in with diverse perspectives. I think there's sometimes a little challenge in trying to get new graduates to try to see that commonality, but it is good to have the different perspectives coming into the field. Another set of happenings that were going on during this period is the Office of Early Childhood and Out-of-School Learning was taking on in a big way quality around early childhood care, so through age 6. And established the voluntary Path to Quality system with 4 levels of rating that they were able to, with a combination of carrots and sticks, be able to get broad buy-in in the state. And I think that helped for parents to understand the idea of quality in youth care, in youth education, and it also, I think, prepared the office to really try to carry forward. So 2 or 3 years ago, at the time they renamed their office, they decided they wanted to carry on this work from the early childhood into the out-of-school families that they were serving. I hear about 1/3 of the vouchers in Indiana go to school-age care. So obviously they wanted to have the quality with us. We've been working with them off and on with that throughout the 3 years to try to get that established. We'd like to see that go faster. One of the things we find in working collaboratively like we do with voluntary compliance and cooperation is that much of the work really runs on the tracks of relationships. And so if somebody leaves an organization, then sometimes that makes a difference in our progress. And so it can backslide a little bit. But we are continuing to work. One thing that we found is that as an ally, and I'll talk about this a little more in a few minutes, is that the child care resource and referral networks around the state in the 9 regions around Indiana are really good partners around this work. And so there's Right now, IAN is working with the Child Care Resource and Referral Networks with our standards, educating them on our standards and our competencies to try to move that forward. On credentialing, when we started all this, there was an existing Indiana Youth Development credential that was being promoted by one organization, and it was a good credential. In part, I think some of the field grew beyond it at the same time that the entity that was managing that credential had some challenges and went out of business. So particularly the intermediaries I've discussed, came together to try to come up with what do we want to have for a new credential in Indiana. And that took place over about a year and a half, again, with the Lilly Endowment support and leadership around that. And we ended up deciding to go with the CYC certification, which is a multi-state certification actually based in Texas. For you folks at home, we're certificated in Texas right now. So it's actually based in Texas, but it's also, I understand, used in Wisconsin, Louisiana, Ohio, and now Indiana. And we implemented that late last year. We have now about 60 to 80 people who are in the CYC credential track. And like in New Hampshire, there are different levels of that. So there's an entry level up to the professional level. And so we're seeing some traction with getting that together. The training for that, we caught some training that came with CYC. We also have had a variety of training opportunities. The Indiana Youth Institute does a lot of training on site. IAN has been doing for about a year and a half an online academy with CipherWorks out of Cambridge that we've got about 1,200 people signed up for. And so we're in the process of getting some of those accepted into the credentialing, getting some process in a blended learning kind of situation. And then finally, I guess the last thing I'll talk about is the local work. My job is actually going around the state of Indiana and forming providers in communities together to solve problems, to identify opportunities to come forward. And when I talk to the 9 communities I'm working in now, one of the most common things is around staff attraction, staff retention, staff development. And so able to work with them on that. And because the CCR&R network has all of a sudden required each of the 9 local offices to have school-age specialists, they are a tremendous ally in terms of working on the ground for training, with a common training for incoming staff, just basic social and emotional development, classroom management, some of that kind of thing. So for training and for technical assistance, because that's their job, is to go out to providers and meet with them and help them solve problems and have better services. So that's maybe one thing that's a little more unique in Indiana that we're doing. We're still figuring that out in a lot of ways, but it's interesting to hear when you're in front of a provider who's taking time off from taking care of kids, that's what they want to deal with, and that's what they want our help with as well.
Thank you very much, Monty, and thank you, Susan, for sharing your state perspective. And we want to now take some time for more questions and discussions around these state-level strategies. If you're with us online, you can add your questions to the chat room. But maybe this time we'll start here in the room. And again, Kathy has the mic and we'll come over to you. But anyone have questions for Monty or Susan about their strategies to date?
So while you guys think of your questions, I'm giving you a little time to prep those questions. I just wanted to thank, on behalf of NAA, to thank both of you. These 2 are representing 2 of our 32 state affiliates, and we just appreciate all of the work that they do. And I knew about a little bit, but it was a real pleasure to hear about all the progress that you've made, especially over time. So thank you.
I have one quick question, a clarification that was online. And also, just so you know, Monty, lots of support for Indiana. People are applauding your presentation. But the question was, can you clarify what CYC is?
Hold the camera up. It's an organization out of College Station, Texas, with CYC Child and Youth Care Certification Board. And they've developed this program, perhaps I can share this information out so you can all see it, but it does the certification in the several states that I mentioned.
We have some hands up over here. Again, please introduce yourself quickly.
Hi, this is Kelly Writing with the Utah After School Network, and I have a question for Susan around your credential. How did you create meaning and impact around that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? How did we create?
How did you create meaning around the credential? So was there a clout around why people wanted to invest in it in the system?
Incentive. We're still working on that. If you look over in the corner, we have the top 10 reasons why you would want to be credentialed. But what we're finding, we have some programs now that when we start talking about compensation and we talk about doing a compensation survey, we say, you know, what are your site directors paid? What are your group leaders? What are your direct service staff paid? Compensated? How are they compensated? We recently had one program say, we don't provide compensation scales on positions. We provide them on your credential. So if you come in with a direct service credential level 1, they're all required to have a credential. If you come in at direct service level 1, this is your compensation. And as you gain more experience and more education and move up the credential lattice, then you have an increase in compensation. And it continues that way. So that's really what the intention is behind the credential, for it somehow to impact compensation. But the other thing is, you know, our credential program is voluntary. You do not need to have a credential in New Hampshire. But it really is a recognition that you have a specific body of knowledge that other programs and staff members may not have. So we have, we have several programs, but I'm thinking of several programs in particular. A parent walks in the door, and the first thing they see is a wall of framed credentials. And the question is, what are those? And, you know, the director explains the experience, the education of the staff, and, you know, then the parent leaves and goes to interview the next after-school program and walks in, and there's nothing on the wall, and says to the director, are your staff credentialed? And the answer is no. So where's that parent going to send their child? To the program that recognizes you need experience, knowledge, and skills to really offer the best support for their children, So that's a strong incentive. And I think beyond that, if your career path is not necessarily going to be an after school for a long period of time, what does it say to a prospective employer when you have invested yourself in a voluntary system that shows your dedication to the field and to continued knowledge? It really is, I think it's a check plus on someone's application and work.
And I want to reinforce what Susan said and honestly bring it back to the grocery store chain and the cheese shop, and not to be flippant, but I think sometimes in our field, and it's about our mindset, you know, as employers, and about our obligation to customers. In this case, you know, when I read about the, you know, what they want, so, you know, this is a field that is, grocery store workers are not highly compensated, but yet they are saying to better serve our customers in selecting cheese, you know, we think they need to know, our staff needs to know how to do this. So, I mean, I'm just going to say that I think, you know, again, for our field, we need to think about, you know, what our obligation is, what our responsibility is, and then again, as employers, as leaders in this field, to begin from the position of, you know, in order to do what we need to do and we're expected to do this, yes, it's voluntary compliance, but how important it is to the goals that we want for the children and the families that we serve.
And I think it speaks to professionalizing the field as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it is a visual display of your experience in education, of your knowledge, and that you are not just taking care of kids after school.
Absolutely.
I also wonder, you know, if our field isn't playing victim to something that we've created for ourselves. And, you know, even though 39% of the people that answered our survey that have been with their current employer, is that the one? But we talk a lot about turnover, so then there's 60% turnover on the opposite side of that, right? So, but as leaders and as a field, we need to move beyond the OJT, like, right, that on-the-job training, and whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger school of development. You know what, if we care about development, about youth, and our nation, right? We need to prioritize professional development, and we need to systemize it, and it can be done. We just all need to make it a priority and work together to make it happen.
Thank you, Heidi. We had 2 more questions over here, Kathy.
Thank you. I am Gretchen Yeager, and just to piggyback off what you said, Heidi, and I don't want to make any assumptions, so this is really a point of clarification for both of you in both states. Is it a credential recognized by state as a qualification for licensing? As a provider myself, right? That's typically the first thing that we look at is credentialing to qualify our folks to actually be in position, and I wondered if you could speak to that.
Not yet in Indiana. Not yet. It is recommended under the 21st century, but not a requirement.
Licensing in New Hampshire is actively involved in the development of the credential and the levels. So, yes.
And just, Susan, is that tied to any funding that providers get for being licensed for populations, or no?
We have a licensed plus program,
okay.
And part of that requirement is credentialing.
And those programs can receive higher levels of reimbursement for certain populations in
yes.
their programs?
Yes.
So that would be incentive if you're working within that system. And I think, you know, to Kelly's question, from Kelly from Utah's question, and I know a couple other people have similar questions, then that's incentive. Like if you're a provider and you work in the licensed childcare world, if you have credentialed people or higher skilled people, then your reimbursement rate is higher for kids that receive that funding.
Another incentive might be that well, here's a question. Are your credentials based on college credit?
We're working on that.
Okay. And in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
Some of them are.
Some of them are.
So as you move up the lattice,
they can articulate into
That's right.
higher level degrees of
Right.
an associate's or a bachelor's degree, which is, I think, very attractive.
I think we had one more question here and then one on the other side of the room.
Hi, Ruth Elba Jorgensen with the California School Age Consortium, and I'm curious about data on the impact on recruitment and retention, as well as improving quality of programs, increasing wages, kind of like the larger impact that we're hoping to have with these strategies. And if you have any data on that shows that staff are staying in the field longer because they have this credential, or they're seeing an increase in their wages because of these credentials, and even being able to tie that directly back to quality.
we do not have data right now.
Yeah, and again, our credential is really just a few months old, so it's hard to have data. I mean, we've seen anecdotally, and I think there's been some research done around early childhood, and some around kind of the corollary of professional development and workforce in early childhood, that has increased retention, that has increased some of the income, and parents are choosing quality that includes quality workforce.
There is some national data on the Child Development Associate and its relationship to reducing turnover, but I don't think we have it yet for the youth development field.
So the interviews that I talked about earlier, we actually wrote a book chapter, and I know a few people on the panel contributed to this book chapter, and the book's coming out, I think, in a few months or so. What I believe is the fall. Thank you. You know, I like to get ahead of myself, Dale. That what we believe, and I hope your answer will be, we will have it. So, you know, we found the core knowledge and competency, the research was showing in 2004 that we needed core knowledge and competencies for our field. We came out in 2011 with core knowledge and competencies for our field. It is now 2017, right? So, and these systems have now caught up. They're start to use the CKCs, and so the next step is like to figure out where the people are that have been doing this, because you can't get the data doesn't just come after one thing. I mean, there's going to be a little bit more longevity. So my answer for the group is we will have the data, because we need to have it.
We have a question online, and then we had a question up here.
Great. Yeah, we have a great question online, which is, does your work include any marketing to your communities to increase parent-guardian awareness of the work and opportunities for their children?
Not yet. A lot of that coming out. It really is new, really, in a lot of ways, in the pilot stage of this. But again, seeing what had happened with the early childhood path to quality, I think, is guiding a lot of our work, and we hope to get to that.
Mm-hmm. And across New Hampshire is really focused on professional development and technical assistance with programs. So, but the New Hampshire After-School Network will be developing some material to distribute to families.
You know, it's interesting because I think it was Gina that brought up employers, and we've been, I think some of you may know that we've been working on this STEM credential pilot program. So a credentialing program that has stackable digital badges that put facilitation skills together, and it's leveled, but I mean, it's focused on STEM facilitation skills. And it's interesting that the question is about marketing to families. And what we have found is that we actually need to convince ourselves, right? So the question from our funder is, well, what kind of marketing do you have for the employers? And so the questions we have to answer to people are, you know, why is this important? And so what I decided to say back, because it seems so clear to me, is why isn't it important? How can this not be important? If we know that high quality programs are based on the quality of the staff, and that's what gets the outcomes for youth, how could it not be important? So, you know, don't make us justify why it is important. You tell me why it's not.
Up here, yeah.
Hi, I'm Charmaine Turner. I actually had two questions, and mine is actually also a point of clarification. Are the associates that you have in New Hampshire compensated at a higher level with the credential? I wasn't sure if I missed that.
Not all programs offer that, but some programs do.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then my second question is for the core competencies, the core knowledge and competencies. How is there a measuring tool that complement these? I mean, I'm just looking at this and I'm looking like, oh, okay, you could probably use like a YPQA, and then you could use this, you could use that, you could use a DESA, you know, but I was just wondering, is there something that you all have that actually complements and aligns?
And Charmaine, right?
Yes.
So it's interesting that you asked that, because we've been going around doing these presentations on the core knowledge and competencies document, and then we do have 5 different leveled self-assessment tools, and what people say to us is, you know, we need a one-pager to understand that. So now we have the one-pager. We didn't bring the core knowledge and competencies document. We didn't bring the self-assessment tools, but they are available in the NCASE resource library. And they are, the way we work at the national level, whether it's our quality standards or our core knowledge and competencies, or any of the things that we produce, we realize, just based on some of the challenges that Ellen mentioned that there are all these systems. So whatever we create nationally needs to be able to be adopted. You can take it, you can add to it based on what your local stakeholders need, because we know that you need to be responsive to the communities that you work in and the employees that you have. So we've made it that. And then, I mean, they're designed for people to drive their own development. Right, so you can use the self-assessment tool, evaluate kind of where you are, what are my strengths, what are the things I need to work on, because research also shows that that's what you need to be able to, so we do continuous program improvement, right? So we're talking about continuous professional development and improvement, and there's action plans, and there's places to find the resources that align with what you need to work on. And then there's also ways to think about how might I share what I know, because that also helps you move up levels in your own within the core knowledge and competencies.
And I want to add that also at NAA, our commitment to making these resources available and free for programs, because directly tied equity to access to professional development is directly, to me, is a huge component of quality. And so, you know, that's our commitment as an association. And so we encourage you, you know, to adopt that within your program. And you mentioned some wonderful tools, but for the communities and the neighborhoods and the organizations that don't have access to purchasing those resources, this is a high quality tool that's of free cost, because of that commitment we have to ensuring that quality is accessible to all of our communities and particularly to all of our professionals too.
So I also wanted to add how vital the core competencies can be at the system level.
Yes.
Because while it is vitally important to the development of personal professionalism and professional development, think about the application of the core competencies for system level. For example, ways in which the core competencies can be built into the credential itself, and degree granting programs, and perhaps the quality rating and improvement systems that might be able to build on this, so that there's alignment across system elements, even to the level of how NAA uses the core competencies here at the convention and organizing the workshops and the seminars according to the core competencies. So you could do that at the state level, you can do that at the city level, you can, pardon me? Organizational level. So it has multiple applications that can be very powerful. One of the things that is so confusing for higher ed is that, as you met, I think it was you, Susan, that said how, who was the one that talked about where the course is nested can vary. Mm-hmm. So it might be in education, it might be in early childhood or child development, psychology, social work. All of these places might be the home of some of the higher ed opportunities. But wouldn't it be wonderful if someday there's actually a discipline of, and I know this is the lifelong work of Dale Blythe, is to think about a discipline in our field that then is rooted in higher education and the academics. There's a research base, there's a literature that we have, and so that we don't just follow along, you know, wherever there is maybe some excitement by a faculty member, oh, bring it on here, but that there really is a place and a home for our work at the higher level, academic level.
So I think we have time for one last question before we close.
So we hire over 2,000 employees. I'm at LA's Best in Los Angeles, and they're all part-time. So we've got over 2,000 part-time employees and less than 50 full-time employees. A lot of those part-time employees do stay for a long time. Mm-hmm. A lot of them have been there 10, 15, 20 years. But, you know, the majority of them don't stay that long, obviously. And the way that the system is built, there's very, you know, limited opportunity to move into full-time positions. Mm-hmm. And we're not planning to change that anytime soon, right? But about over 40% of those 2,000 employees plan to become teachers. And over 75% of them plan to become either teachers or other human service workers, so social workers, parole, probation, other human services fields. So while I sort of like the daydream of this whole discipline of youth development that's carved out and respected in the same way as these other fields, I also just recognize that this is a cross-sector field.
Yes.
And I feel like if we're going to try to push it towards becoming teaching social work, after school, or youth development, or whatever we call it, it feels like a very steep uphill push that's going a little bit against the way that the natural flow of things goes. So my question, I guess, is how does all this connect to the reality of after school being a launching pad for other careers?
Yes.
And have you considered like accepting that instead of resisting it?
So I think, do you want me to respond?
We have 1 minute,
Okay.
so a 1 minute summary to that great question.
And now I'm on 50 seconds, right? So, Eric, that's the reality that I come from and my background, and I think we, as true youth development professionals ourselves, we believe in meeting people where they are, and this presentation and panel happens to be on professionalizing the workforce with a certain end in mind. But as I hear you talking, I think and. It is not or. None of us up here are resisting. We are just, it's and. So whoever the people are, and we've acknowledged that it is very, very diverse. There's background, experience, education, very diverse. That what we're trying to do and why we have these self-assessment tools and other things is to meet the people where they are, give them what they need. So even if you are part-time, you're a valuable part of our workforce and you still need to continue to develop. So whatever that looks like, we will work on developing it.
Thank you so much, Heidi, and thank you to you and Gina for hosting us here at NAA. This has been a great opportunity. Thanks to Susan and Monty for sharing their state perspective. Ellen, thank you for giving us the history, and thanks to the rest of the NCASE team helping facilitate this. We really appreciate everyone being with us today. We've mentioned several times resources that are being collected in the resource library. We encourage you to explore those, but also give us recommendations of what you feel needs to be there, what's missing and would be beneficial to the field. This is designed to grow and expand as our work grows. Today's presentation is just the beginning of work that we'll be doing on workforce, and so we're looking for your feedback. For everyone online, as soon as the session is completed, there'll be a survey request. We really value your feedback on the content and the format that we've provided, and certainly thank you for participating in this experiment with us today and doing this live event.